Today I'm doing another double bill. This time I'm calling it Tales of Strange Egotism, which is I'm going to do two films I saw pretty close together, which is why I put them together. One's a comedy called Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, another one's called Girl on the Third Floor, which is two films, very different genres. It's one's basically a comedy buddy movie, another one's a horror movie. But they both are about egotistical lead characters dealing with family and how they basically use and abuse their family for their own egos. But they have different outcomes because of the different characters and different genres and what you need. So, I'm going to start with the Nicolas Cage one, which is The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, which is a mouthful as a title. This one was an actual nice surprise because, yeah, it's one of those ones where I've liked a lot of the more recent Nicolas Cage movies where he's doing a lot of weird, interesting things again. Like, through a time he had to pay off back taxes, he did a lot of stuff. Some of it good, some of it trashy, but now it seems to be, there's still some dodgy films here or there, but there seems to be a lot more, he's been working a lot more interesting people again, and he's doing things like this. He's done things like Pig, Colour Out of Space, all of those kind of things. He's working with interesting directors. He's done stuff for Paul Schrader. He's doing a lot of stuff that where you tell he's invested. He's doing it because he wants to do it, which was always the best Cage version of Cage. Usually, like from the 80s onwards, he's an actor who obviously likes to work, and if you put him a good director, you usually get really good stuff from it. And sometimes works with directors maybe he should not work with, but he does it anyway because he wants to try different things. So his CV's all over the place, quality-wise, genre-wise. He likes to try things. The good thing about him is he's not a snob for any kind of filmmaking. He just does what he's interested in. He tries things. So you're going to get... Next year he's playing Dracula in a film called Renfield. And, he did a film about Pig. He's done lots of stuff. He played Noir Spider-Man in Into the Spider-Verse. He tries lots of different things. And there's a lot of really good stuff out there. There's a lot of really bad stuff out there too, but those are the breaks. At least he's trying things. And this one is a film about his whole career. From the face-offs, to the Con Airs, to the weird adaptations, and the, Wicker Man jokes. There's everything gets covered. And it takes in the absurdity of his entire career. Like how silly some of it is and how wonderful some of it is. And the idea he's playing a fiction version of himself where he's this guy called Nick Cage who's insecure and he blows off what would be a comeback film by being too Nicolas Cage for a director. Being too egotistical, too enthusiastic and too needy for the director. And the director just I think I'll go with someone else, someone who probably less of a problem to deal with in the set. So he's kind of stuck where he's not getting the parts and he's in debt and he's getting divorced. So there's a fictional family that's not actually his actual family. An ex-wife is fictionalised. And he's offered $1 million to go and hang out for a weekend with this guy who's this South American businessman. Which he turns down to start with, but then he realises he needs the money because he blew this thing out. So he has to go, and the character's played by Pedro Pascal, the Uber fan who's also really rich. And it's about them meeting up and how they can bring it the best in each other. Like, Pedro Pascal's a fan, but he's a genuine fan, but he also could be a mass murderer because the FBI, the CIA, grab him before he goes to visit the guy and says, this guy's is basically the head of a cartel and we want you to spy on him for us. So you basically get the film where Nicolas Cage is basically being a character but also trying to deal with this guy who has to be a spy character in these such spy situations, but also he starts to bond with the guy because the guy's a fan, but the guy's also very genuine. He likes Nicolas Cage for certain reasons that are a genuine fan reaction, and Cage can't work out who's the real guy. He's really a killer, or is he a psycho? And he has to stay undercover for longer than he wants to, because he has to stay long on the weekend. And of course, the family get involved, and it's all an absurd notion of all your past sins coming back to haunt you. Because Cage is so obviously rubbish with his family, the drug kingpin brings the family down. And is it to threaten him or is it to help him? Cage doesn't know, because he doesn't know who the guy actually is. And it plays out pretty much like adaptation. Adaptation is this thing where it's looking at Cage screaming out trying to adapt a novel, and all these absurd things start to happen to him. These like cliche things. I like this film better on Massive Weight better. Or Unbearable Weight better. Because adaptation felt it's a bit too self-aware for its own good. It felt like it was patting itself in the back a little bit too hard. So I wasn't as keen on it. This one has less layers to it. It definitely has less layers. It's not as complicated as adaptation is. But I found it a lot more enjoyable because it wasn't patting itself in the back. It was fine with being silly sometimes, but also had this serious thing of what people do when they think they're artistic and what they think the world owes to them, and the assuming egotism they have for how everything they like must be interesting to everyone else, even the family members. And it's like everyday egotism and how it affects other people and how needy it really is. And by being with this other guy, Cage starts to the fictional Nicolas Cage starts to see his own flaws. Now it's very obvious stuff, but it's really well done. It's the character stuff between Pascal and Cage is really well done. You like both characters. It's a buddy movie where one of the buddies might be a psycho. And how it plays out, I'm not going to say how it plays out because it's a new film, but it plays out satisfying. Like, everything fits to, when you find the explanation, everything fits. And you don't feel cheated. It's not the most amazing explanation, but it all fits in for what kind of film this is, and it's a good-natured film, and there's some wonderful stuff in it. So it's very enjoyable. It's like, it's available in Britain at the moment on Amazon Prime, and it's definitely worth watching because it's really well done. And all the stuff you fear could go wrong with this film, it could be so self-indulgent, so egotistical, doesn't happen. It's aware of all those pitfalls and is very aware of, how badly this thing could go, and it sidesteps them really well. So that's a good-natured version of what egotism can do to a person. The horror movie version is A Girl on the Third Floor, which is a very different film. This stars Phil Brooks, CM Punk, the wrestler, who's moving into acting. Now, Punk's a wrestler I really like. I quite like wrestling. Certain wrestlers I really like Punk. But, wrestlers into movies, it varies, is the best way to put it. Some work really well, some don't. I mean, the first one that worked was Roddy Piper, because he could act, he could tone it down so that he could be outrageous sometimes, but he also could tone it down. He didn't do the biggest career in movies, but he made Hell Goes to Frogtown and The Wonderful They Live. And he was in other parts after that. But he could tone it down. He was the first person to work it out how to tone it down to a degree that people could understand. Hulk Hogan was the opposite. Hulk Hogan was like the guy who couldn't tone it down. I mean, other wrestlers like Kevin Nash have come along and done small parts. Obviously, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, came along. He became a movie star pretty quick. He's like the movie star mode. Like, he jumped in. Everyone thought he was going to be a movie star straight away. It took him a while, but now he is that. So early on, he did some character stuff that was much more fun than what he does now. But he does what he does. It's like he's a movie star. Dave Bautista went in another direction. He went to the character actor stuff. Like he got famous on the movies by playing Drax and Guardians of the Galaxy, but showing how he could be funny. Because as an actual wrestler, he was never funny, but he was showed up that part of his personality. And since then, he's done some nice, sensitive work, as well as villain parts, and he's done a lot of stuff to show off he can do a lot of things. So now he's now a kind of character actor who can put in different things. Sometimes he's a lead, sometimes he's support, but he tends to always be good, and worth the money of watching him in films, because he tends to actually try. He's always putting the effort in to be good, and he is trying to do good projects. He does one or two dodgy ones, but generally he's pretty solid. John Cena is into movie acting recently. He's still kind of test case. He's done some good stuff, some bad stuff. He tends to do good supporting parts, playing funny characters, and he really delivered well in Peacemaker. Yeah, with James Gunn, like he's found a level where he can act and be funny. So how his career goes is still up in the air. Because again, like Batista, he's not playing the same guy playing wrestling. That's the big thing. The Rock is still The Rock. He's adapted his wrestling personality into the films. Cena and Batista really haven't. They've actually approached as actors, and like Cena's allowed to be funnier than he would ever be in wrestling. Because wrestling he had to be the straight man. Now he gets to be the funny guy. Punk is still kind of in that stage of he's doing parts and he's getting better, but he definitely seems to be going much more toward the Batista thing, where he'll take supporting parts in films, he'll show up and do little bits and get killed, but he also will try and do serious stuff. He's doing the thing with the wrestling thing with Stephen Amell just now with the wrestlers, but he's also done other stuff. And that's when The Girl on the Third Floor was his first lead part. And it's a good start. It's a really good start. I mean, it's one of those things that you can tell he's learning on the job in a way. Because early on, this feels like it was shot in sequence. I might be wrong though. But there's parts earlier on where you can see he's still a bit self-conscious. He's never bad, but this feeling of self-consciousness that as the film goes on feels to go. Like someone's much more... It's not... He's always been very natural in front of the camera as his wrestling persona. Like he knows how to pitch stuff and how to tone it down, because he was always much more less big as a wrestler, as a wrestling persona. He was much more about the anger and about the connecting with the audience. In this one, he's still learning how to do that with no audience. I think it just took him a little while. But it's noticeable that he's much better as he goes on. Like, it just feels like the first few days there's some self-consciousness, and then suddenly there's not anymore. Like, there's a kind of tone where it just seems to have moved from being a case of it wasn't really obvious self-conscious, just a teensy bit you feel an undertone of the performance, like a kind of holding back slight awkwardness that kind of goes pretty quick. Like once he starts interacting with people and interacting with the situation, it seems to loosen up quite a lot. So it's basically essentially a good performance, just a little stiff at the start, really. But it gets a lot better as it goes on. It's like, okay, this guy's talent. He can really go and do other stuff now because there is obviously talent there. And once they can go over that hump of the self-consciousness at the start, it really worked. And it's a good film. It's a nice little ghost story. Because I like ghost stories. I always adore a good ghost story. That's a good ghost story. And it also does the thing that I like in a ghost story is it remembers in a ghost story the lead character has to be flawed. You can't have a ghost story with a perfect lead character. It's boring. A lead character, the ghosts have to reflect the flaws of the lead character. And this one, he's an asshole. It's quite good that Punk was actually confident enough to play a guy who is undoubtedly an asshole and who plays on his reputation in wrestling as being someone who can be difficult at times. Which is part of the charm of Punk in wrestling, is he calls out people who you'd love to see called out. And this one, he plays on that, an idea of this is what we call toxic masculinity and full bore. Really, Now, there's toxic masculinity, which they bring up and they make it very caricatured. It's like all men are awful, blah blah blah, which isn't the case. It's a much more. I mean, there's feminine toxicity as well, where there's female traits that can, if unchecked, lead to bad behaviour. Same with male stuff. There's male stuff that, if unchecked, it can lead to bad stuff, and you should just check it and say, like, don't do that. It's not good for anybody. And this is a bit of what happens when someone's not checked themselves enough and who are screwing up because their ego's just there. So unlike the Nicolas Cage movie where it's someone who learns to deal with people and actually check his ego a bit more and realise that it's not all about me. This one is about a guy who can't quite do that, who basically fatally always feels it's about him. And no matter how kind he seems to be to other people, he wants it brought back to him. And it's a good role for someone who wants to prove themselves as an actor by playing someone who's not nice and not actually trying to sugarcoat and make him suggest that he is nice or he is strong. No, this guy's weak. This guy is weak and will fall for the ghosts because he's a weak person who has been driven by ego, has used a lot of people, and when he makes a mistake and falls off the wagon and does things that are not good for him, he's always got an excuse. And the film becomes about the house used to be a brothel, and there are always men like this who also have an excuse for the bad behaviour, and it's never their fault. And it's about this idea of how men can actually forgive themselves for things they say, that got out of hand, but it really wasn't my fault. I would have known. And it's like, no, you should have known. Like, logical common sense would have told you this cannot end well. Like, there's going to be a conversation next day or down the line which is going to be really awkward for your reactions, and you should have known that in the first place. And it's that thing of someone who can just forgive himself a little bit too easily. And you can sense this is how he set himself to hell in the first place. By forgiving himself for things and calling people for things and saying, it's not really that bad what I'm doing. And it's just this psychology that builds up. And now they put him in a ghost story situation where his misdeeds and his forgiveness of himself for his misdeeds leads to violence and leads to terrible situations. And it all falls on his friends, as it has in the past, where he thinks it's just on him, and it's like, no, all this horror, because of the hauntings, falls on his wife and his baby to be, and all of his toxic behaviour falls on his friends, who become victims of the house. And it's just this sense of what this guy really is below the surface, which is someone who you don't want to deal with. Ultimately, it's someone who's just a problem. So that's the film's about. It's a really well done ghost story. It takes place in one house with a few locations around about it. It knows how to shoot the house well without being over the top with the location. Everything makes sense within the story. Even though you can figure out certain bits, speaks to the story, it still understands it's a ghost story, and there's certain expectations of a ghost story, and if you deliver on them and are honest about them, the film will work. And this film does that. It did not try for gimmicks, which is what I don't like about certain modern ghost stories, is like, don't try for gimmicks, just tell the ghost story. And show that the impact of the ghost on the people and what the situation is. And that does this. There's a slow build. As you get into the film, there's a certain awkwardness at the start, obviously, because it's a new actor, basically. And it's also the setup. The setup is about him getting into the house. You get into the film. But once he starts to interact with people and starts to see things, the film really just starts delivering. And then at a certain point, it splits off into another angle that actually is pretty satisfying because it explains a lot of what's going on. But let's take a left turn that's quite interesting. So, basically, Girl on the Third Floor, definitely recommend. I'm not going to say what happens because it still is a fairly new film, but it's definitely worth seeing because it's got a nice little ghost story. It's made by people who are into the film they're making, and they want to just do a good ghost story, and they do want to have that subject matter. And do it in a way that's reasonable rather than screaming out toxic masculinity. It's like, no, this is what really toxic masculinity actually is. It's the small details over time. It's not about the big stupid gesture. It's about the small details about how they create an effect over time to people around them, and how the lack of self-awareness can cause a lot of problems. And of course, the first film is about that lack of self-awareness, but it's how that gets. In that case, it's about how someone sees beyond themselves and, oh, I better improve. And this one is like, I will not improve. So there seems to be a good little mix of films to talk about. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you go and see both these films, and I'll be back soon with some more.